welcome to Indian and Islamic News. Our guest today is Laura Weinstein. She is curator of South Asian and Indian art at Museum of Fine Arts. Currently, MFA is also running an exhibition called Divine Color. We are going to talk to her about Divine Color as well as the Indian collection at Museum of Fine Arts. Laura, welcome to our studio.
Thank you very much.
And this is the second time I'm talking with you, my privilege here. And earlier we did an interview with Ananda Sharma, who is also one of the patrons of Museum of Fine Arts. Mm-hmm. And she spoke very highly of you. So I'm going to find out how truthful she was.
You can trust her.
Okay, good. So let's start with this Divine Color. Mm. First, talk about what is this exhibition and why it is so significant.
Sure. So the exhibition, as you said, it's called Divine Color. The full title is Divine Color, Hindu Prints from Modern Bengal. And it is actually the biggest exhibition that the MFA has had focusing on Indian art in 20 years. So for that reason alone, it's exciting. It's also exciting because it's an exhibition that explores a facet of Indian art that is not very often explored in museums. And a lot of people will be familiar with the idea of calendar art, the popular colorful images that people have in homes throughout India and the Indian diaspora.
I grew up with those calendars,
Of course.
Actually, it used to be most of the new calendars will get on the New Year's Eve time.
Yeah.
And it used to be so exciting, the parents, our uncles and aunts coming home, which is holding the calendars. We right away open the calendar and see what is in the calendar. So it was a very, still it happens in India, yes. Yes.
Yeah, around Diwali time, you get a new one.
New Year's.
New Year's,
yes.
A lot of people are familiar with the artist Raja Ravi Verma, and people think of him as the founder of calendar art, but actually in Calcutta in the 1880s, Bengali artists were already producing very, very early examples of these kind of colorful, brightly hued, detailed images of Hindu gods and goddesses and selling them for very cheap prices, which meant that they just flooded communities, markets, families, and households. And so we can trace this modern part, this part of modern Indian visual culture back to this early date. And our exhibition tells that story and talks about how it came about because of lithography. Lithography was this new mode of mass reproduction that began in Germany in the 1790s, but in the 1800s, when it got to India, artists there began using it to make new types of imagery for local purposes. And because they were able to use lithography, they made prints that were much, much cheaper than they had ever been before. And actually, can I use an example?
Sure.
So I brought a copy of our catalog.
So it has become a book too, right?
It has become a book called Divine Color. And the print that's on the cover of the book is this print of Krishna and Balarama, and in it you can see the colors are so intense. They're absolutely, jumping off the page. They're so vibrant.
I mean, each and every color is incredible. So what you can say more about this painting and the colors?
Yeah. So here we see Krishna and Balarama, his brother, standing underneath a tree, as they are very often in Indian art. Krishna in the region of Bengal is an incredibly important figure who is worshipped not only as an avatar, one of the avatars of Vishnu, but really as a kind of supreme god in and of himself. But he's often shown with Balarama, his brother, and the two of them are kind of a pair. And here they stand underneath the tree that kind of becomes a symbol for Krishna himself. And it's a perfectly symmetrical composition. Krishna with his blue skin and Balarama with his kind of pale skin. But if you look at the details of their clothing, the colors of their dress, and the sky that's incredibly brightly colored behind them, what you see is this new aesthetic, this new visual culture that came about because lithography allowed them to print images in new ways, imported inks from Europe that were synthetic and highly colorful, And then a lot of new kind of detail that was possible that had never been possible before.
So those inks did not exist in India before, like in color? No?
That's right. Okay. That's right. And we can talk about this later, but if you want to learn about how Indian artists made these colors before lithography, before the 19th century, we also have an exhibition for that.
Oh, when that is happening?
Right next door to our special exhibition.
Okay. Yeah, it's fascinating that you mentioned, that the color came from Germany and then it changed the dynamics of
So what we're looking at, which is so interesting, is this story about a form of art that is totally identified with India. You see it and or if you've grown up in India, this art form. And yet it has this really international origin story that's about technology. It's about, kind of cultural contact that happens in the colonial period. It's about Indian artists kind of finding their way and innovating as they encounter new ideas, new artistic kind of materials. And so that's why I think it's an exciting story, because it takes on a life of its own in India, and it has very far-reaching impacts, even into, religion, society, politics. It has so many ripple effects.
Mm-hmm. What else is you notice something like, even we know Krishna and Balarama quite well, but we may not see that which you are able to see in these paintings.
Well, so another goddess that comes up a lot in the exhibition is the goddess Kali. And you might be familiar with the Kalighat temple, which is there in the southern part of Calcutta and is such an important pilgrimage site in the city. People come from all over to worship
So you
Kali.
keep mentioning Calcutta because all these prints are from Calcutta.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So the very first calendar art came from Calcutta and from Pune. In the 1870s, late 1870s. In our exhibition, we focused just on Calcutta because there's so much to say. Calcutta has this really rich history, and there's a lot of artworks that we can use to tell the story. So the story of Pune will have to wait for its own exhibition one day.
I wanted to ask you because if you look, the geography, the Calcutta is on the one side of India, and then Pune is on totally other side. Both are facing ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But so how it happened? How the technology or the color or the print, why there was so much gap?
That's a great question. I think we know that lithography came to Calcutta in the 19th century because the British were there and they were using this technology as a way to reproduce documents that could be used by the colonial government. In Pune, it's not the British capital in India. Okay. It has a totally different set of kind of historical, political circumstances. And lithography was taken up there around the same time, but it was used in very different ways. Okay. So I think you're right. They're so far apart that even though they were doing this at the same time, it's almost like two worlds, apart.
So when that exhibition is happening.
That's a good question.
Okay.
But I wanted to also tell you about Kali.
Okay.
Kali is such an important figure in Bengal. She's understood as a mother who can bestow blessings and protection. And we have one incredible kind of showstopper lithograph in the exhibition, which I wanted to draw people's attention to, because it's an image of Kali standing on Shiva, which represents a story that's very popular in Bengal, a story that Kali was kind of caught up in a mad rage, and she was in danger of destroying the whole world. But Shiva lay down in her path, and when she put one foot on him as she was marching, she froze because, she's standing on her husband. So she froze, it stopped her and it calmed her, and it kind of restored order to the universe. So there's a wonderful story at the center of this print. But if you look at the image, you see it's very dark. There's kind of like dark roiling clouds in the background. You can see it's an image of kind of danger and urgency. And that makes a lot of sense when you look at the Bengali text that appears around the margins of the print, above and on the side.
So there are some text around the print.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is a print that is really a precursor of the modern calendars. The calendar started in around maybe the 1920s. This is from 1890, and it's an early example of a company issuing a print of a god or goddess as a way to advertise their business, but also to kind of communicate messages to their clientele. So in this case, the print was issued by a druggist, and he actually advertises some of his products at the bottom of the print. But on the side, he has this fascinating Swadeshi message. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Swadeshi movement. So on the side, there's actually a text that says, you should use my products because these are indigenous, pure Swadeshi products, and you should use them instead of buying British products if you want to fight for your Hindu brothers. And so here we can begin to see these prints of gods and goddesses becoming so important in culture that they're beginning to be used for commercial messages and for political messages. And that's where I think we see something really exciting happening, where print is allowing these images to move out of the religious world into kind of all different spheres of culture and society and really have a big impact.
Excellent. Can you pick up any other painting, one more from this collection?
Yeah. One more that I thought I would talk about is also a print of Kali, but it's actually Krishna Kali. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not familiar with Krishna Kali, no.
Okay, there's a wonderful story.
I'm familiar with Krishna and the Kali, but not
Krishna Kali. No. So in Bengal, that's one thing that was really important to me, was that this exhibition should look at the stories that are important to Bengali Hindus, because I never want to make generalizations about Hindus as if they're all the same. And Hinduism has so many different facets. So in Bengal, there's a wonderful story that you can kind of refer to as the Krishna Kali story, where Radha is out meeting Krishna in the woods, and suddenly her husband comes looking for her. And very quickly, Krishna turns into Kali, so that instead of having a romantic interlude in the forest, now Radha can just pretend that she's just worshipping Kali. So what we see in this print is an image of Radha kneeling at Kali's feet and doing her puja. And what you can see is that this is a very early example of this art form that you might call calendar art. It's a black print. It has no color printed on it. And that's how they started, just printing with black ink and then hand painting on the color. And the other thing you can see is that it's a horizontal, not kind of a vertical print. And the composition looks like it comes straight out of European painting. It is very much a kind of westernized vision of this very Bengali story. And so this speaks to the early moment in which Bengali artists were injecting their own stories into an art form that essentially came from Europe and finding a way to kind of make it their own and renew it.
So now this is a good time to ask you, in your understanding and knowledge of all the details and history and gods and goddesses and paintings, how did you get interested into this Indian and South Asian art, and how long you have been doing this?
Well, one thing I can tell you is that will make sense to you, I think, is that I grew up in Edison, New Jersey.
Yeah, which is a huge Indian population there. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the beginning. I grew up in a part of New Jersey where there was a huge Indian diaspora, and I grew up going to the Indian grocery stores and record stores and restaurants, and with a lot of Indian classmates or Indian American classmates. But really it got started for me when I was in college, and I went and spent a semester in Jaipur. And
which year was that?
2000.
2000, okay.
Yeah.
And how long did you spend?
That was just maybe 3-4 months.
3-4 months. Okay.
But it was long enough to really fall in love and have a wonderful experience. And gosh, that's been more than a quarter century. And I've been going back, almost every year, not quite, ever since then. And I just, I found that India is a place where I never run out of things to learn.
And where you go to India? Rajasthan or different places every time?
I did my PhD on paintings from the Hyderabad area. So I spent a lot of time in the Deccan. But now, as a staff member at the MFA, I go to Delhi and Bombay a lot to go to the great museums and collections. But I still like to travel, and I did recently, as part of this project, go to Calcutta for the first time.
Sure, okay. And where did you do your PhD from, and what was the topic of your PhD?
I was at Columbia University.
Okay.
Yeah, and I studied 16th century paintings from Golconda, Hyderabad area. So these were Persian Persian manuscripts that were produced in Golconda and illustrated by local artists. So they're kind of, again, a sort of a fusion of Persian and Indian style. I always like to look at topics that kind of have a sort of element of fusion or hybridity, because the mixing is what makes something really interesting to me.
What a wonderful treasure you are for India. Excellent. I'm really glad that you are doing all these things. Now, let's talk about the other South Asian collection at the Museum of Fine Arts.
Yeah. So the key thing that makes us so proud to work with this collection is that the MFA was the first American museum to have an Indian art collection. We were collecting already Indian art in the late 19th century, but it really got going in 1917 when the scholar Ananda Coomaraswamy came to the MFA along with his collection of bronzes and paintings, and he became the curator. And so for the last 30 years of his life, he was the curator here in Boston, and he oversaw the building of America's first major collection of Indian art. So he acquired important ancient sculptures and medieval sculptures and Chola bronzes. He traveled all over South Asia and built up this collection and wrote about it. And in the process, he kind of formed a canon, formed a model that other American museums would follow. So we have at the MFA a collection of about 8,000 works of Indian art, South Asian art, and we display those in two galleries. So we have a gallery for sculpture, predominantly sculpture from temples, and also decorative art objects, ceramics and metalwork. And in that gallery, we also have some Southeast Asian art. So it's a place where you can come to see monumental temple sculptures, Buddhist and Hindu and Jain, but you can also see the mixing between South and Southeast Asia. And then we also have this really important painting collection. Coomaraswamy, our founder, was the first person to write about Rajput painting. He almost discovered it, but for the West. And so we also have another gallery where we show our Indian painting collection. And that's what I was referring to a minute ago when I was saying that if you come to see our Divine Color exhibition, when you exit, you walk right into a second exhibition space where we have right now a show focusing on how Indian artists, before the modern period, made the colors green, blue, and silver. So what were the kinds of organic materials and minerals that they used to create paints in these vibrant hues, before they had any access to kind of chemicals imported from Europe and whatnot.
That's excellent, fascinating. Now, what is the one of the Indian piece you have, or South Asian piece at the museum, oldest one? Which will be the oldest one?
I think the oldest thing we have would be actually a big collection of a couple thousand objects that were excavated in the Indus Valley. We actually are the largest collection of Indus Valley civilization materials outside of South Asia, because the MFA was part of an excavation in the 1930s at a site in Sindh called Chanu Daro. And so we have objects from about 2000 BC that are, small sculptures, beads, pottery, jewelry, and it's a very precious collection.
And also a big Buddha statue there too, Stupa. Tell me, I remember the first time I went to that museum, I had just arrived here from Mexico, and I look at that, and then for the first time I had a real teary eye. I said, oh my God, how old it is, and I can see with my eyes, thousands of years later. So tell me about that piece of art. It always haunts me.
To be honest, I don't know exactly which Buddha, because we're lucky enough to have a number of Buddha sculptures.
Well, one big one, one of the biggest.
The big one.
The big one.
Well, one of the ones you might be thinking of is a really beautiful Gandharan Buddha. So it's a standing Buddhist figure probably from Pakistan or from far north India, made around the 3rd century CE. And it's kind of a beautiful, majestic standing Buddha figure in robes and wearing amulets around his neck and around his arms. But it's standing right next to another Buddha figure, another Buddha sculpture from almost the same time period, but made further into India, sort of more like central India, in a totally different style. So, I have to say, there are many.
This one sounds familiar.
Is that the one? Okay, yes. That one is like a seated Buddha figure with a chakra on his palm.
That sounds,
That's the one.
That's the one. Yeah.
They're all, I love them all equally. They're all special, and I'm glad you had a good experience with that one.
So when these pieces, for the first time, when they came to the museum, or maybe you can tell me a little bit about the history of the MFA. When it started and how this collection
Yeah, the MFA was founded around 1870. I think opened its doors in 1872, and already from the very beginning of the institution, there were collections of Asian art at a time when very few other museums in the U.S. were collecting art from that part of the world. And in that early period, Bostonians would travel to India sometimes, and they would bring back coins or jewelry, little sort of bits and bobs. But the collecting didn't get serious really until the early decades, the early years of the 20th century. And so that is a period when the museum thought, okay, we have incredible, important collections of Chinese and Japanese art, but we can't truly tell the story of Asia unless we also include India, because in fact, in so many ways, India is where it begins, where the Buddha,
Sure.
was born and lived his life. And so that collection then was formed starting around, in earnest, starting around 1917.
Excellent. In addition to Divine Color and all the great stuff you have at the museum, pieces of art, is anything else happening there at the museum?
Yes. I'm glad you asked, because I want to tell people about a program coming up. We have a free lecture happening this Sunday, May 17th at 2 p.m. in our big auditorium. Professor from Harvard, Jinna Kim, will be speaking about color in a lecture that's inspired by the exhibition. And she's going to talk about how artists in India have used color, especially in painting, and kind of explore how color is used to create religious meaning and evoke visions, and also look into the nitty-gritty about how colors are produced. She's a brilliant scholar. The lecture is free, and I encourage people to come and attend the lecture and then go see the exhibition.
On that note, your last word about the Divine Color?
My last word would be that with this exhibition, we're really trying to show a new side of Indian art that isn't often seen in museums, certainly not in museums in America. So people will have come and seen the ancient sculptures. They will have seen courtly paintings from the Mughals or the Rajput kingdoms, but rarely do you have a chance to see something that connects to popular art and modern urban culture and understand how it has deep roots in the history and the culture of the country. And so I think we're trying to turn over a new leaf and show a whole new side to Indian art, and I hope that people find that exciting.
Laura, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Sure.